Sometimes the only helpful response is to stop and empathize. This is what happened to me on reading an article by Ellie Gordon, where she meets broadcaster and writer Maya Dunphy to discuss grief, loss, and her fronting a new campaign to raise awareness for Irish cancer charities. Maya shared poignantly about the death of her beloved mom, Helen, after a battle with cancer. Maya is an ambassador for Face Up to Cancer, an innovative new digital campaign dedicated to raising funds for cancer research and support services across the island of Ireland, while humanizing what can be a hugely isolating experience for those diagnosed with the illness. The truth is that illness can be isolating and alienating. Serious and chronic illness can make one feel unwelcome in one's own body and out of place in a world of otherwise healthy people. In 1978, writer Susan Sontag wrote, "Illness is the night side of life, a more onerous citizenship. Everyone who is born holds dual citizenship in the kingdom of the well and in the kingdom of the sick. Although we all prefer to use only the good passport, sooner or later each of us is obliged, at least for a spell, to identify ourselves as citizens of that other place." This image of illness as a second and inferior citizenship draws attention to how illness can place a barrier between the self and the world. Even with excellent medical care, one can still feel fundamentally alone and unsupported. Perhaps society has not moved on as much as we like to think from the time of the book of Leviticus and Mark's Gospel, when the person with the skin disease had to live apart. Last week, we listened to the story of Simon's mother-in-law, a healing story without dialogue, featuring the helping hand of Jesus. In today's cure of the isolated man, there is no shortage of dialogue. But we may be surprised by the manner in which Jesus effects the cure. He stretched out his hand and touched him. Touching the leper is Jesus' risk and the leper's greatest need. Revealingly, Jesus, though not contaminated, contracts the leper's social isolation by the end of the story. Hospitality in healthcare is often described as authentic human connection and is often an undervalued remedy for the alienation of illness. In modern medicine, the power that flows from a friendly conversation, a consoling touch, a smile at an opportune time is often undervalued. Such actions re-engage a person in the human world and establishes bonds of connection that are otherwise strained or severed by illness. Hospice pioneer Eric Castle defines suffering as the state of severe distress associated with events that threaten the intactness of the person. Philosopher Gabriel Marcel writes that to provide hospitality is to truly communicate something of oneself to the other. Michael and Tracy Balboni are both experts on the intersection of spirituality with palliative care. And they argue that most clinicians are amazingly compassionate persons, but a separation of medicine from spiritual resources is now increasingly taking its toll on our social systems aimed to care for and heal the seriously ill. In today's healing passage, Jesus effectively reverses the direction of the usual expectation of his day. In touching the unclean person, the expectation was that he would be made unclean. Instead, the unclean man catches his holiness and is made clean. The hurting man experienced shame and isolation. Shame makes people feel defective, unacceptable, incomplete, or fundamentally damaged goods. Shame tells us who and what we are not, but God tells us who and what we are and what we can do. The genius of Jesus is to offer hospitality to the isolated, suffering man and tell him who he really is and what he can really do. Maya Dunphy describes bringing a strong cup of coffee to her mom when she was at her most fragile. Maya says she only managed a sip of it, but even the smell of it was amazing to her. Today, drawing from the riches of the scriptures, I would like to affirm our hospital chaplains. At times, I believe they are undervalued. Xavier Simmons is a research fellow. He notes that while the topic of spirituality and relationship to medicine is a complex one, that we cannot ignore the effects of moral distress on our clinicians. Sympathetically, he notes that it's not easy to smile at a patient when you are 16 hours into a shift. Today's scriptures and the work of hospital chaplains remind us that illness is not just an affliction of the body. Like Jesus, our society needs to reverse the direction of our usual expectations and implement healthcare that seeks to heal both the body and soul. Amen.